You can look completely safe with money and be completely exposed at the very same time. From the outside and to your friends, to your family, to the man you share a bed with, sometimes even to you, the two are impossible to tell apart. They look identical right up until the day something breaks. And then everyone finds out which one you actually were. That is the thing nobody explains before you decide to lean on someone else's income. So let's be clear about what this is and what it isn't. This isn't a video about whether to trust a man, or whether to share a life, or whether love is real. It's about the structure sitting underneath the love, the part that decides one quiet thing: how much room you have to walk away when something goes wrong. Before you depend on a man for money, that structure is the part you actually need to see. Not the romance, the architecture holding it up. And here is the first uncomfortable fact about that architecture. Fewer than half of American women over the age of 25 have any retirement savings in their own name. Not a small amount, any. And most women who do reach retirement arrive with roughly 30% less income than the men who reach it beside them. Sit with that second number, because it is the whole problem in miniature. 30% less, not because women earn 30% less every year, but because 100 small gaps compounded silently across 30 years until they became one enormous one. That is what dependence actually is. It is not a feeling. It is a number that grows in the dark while everything on the surface looks fine. Now make it a person, because numbers don't bleed and people do. Picture two women, Kim and Lauren. Same age, same city, almost the same paycheck, married into homes that look identical from the sidewalk. Two incomes, a mortgage, a shared account, the specific kind of comfortable that doesn't make you anxious on a Tuesday afternoon. Stand them next to each other and you cannot tell them apart. That's the point. You're not supposed to be able to. The only difference between Kim and Lauren is invisible, and it's small enough that you'd never notice it at a dinner party. Kim keeps a retirement account in her own name and feeds it every single month, including the months it feels completely pointless. She has a credit card that builds her own credit file, not just his. She knows the passwords. She could tell you tonight from memory what the household actually owns and what it actually owes. Lauren has none of that. And not because she's lazy or naive. Her husband earns more, he's the one who's good with the spreadsheets, the bills get paid on time every month, and pulling her own money into her own account always felt a little like an accusation against a marriage that was working just fine. Watch how reasonable Lauren sounds. That's the trap, right there. Nobody ever sits Lauren down and talks her out of her own security. She simply keeps not building it, one perfectly sensible month at a time, while the household hums along. And she is not the exception. She is the statistical norm. The pay gap quietly greases the whole thing. Women in this country still earn about 80 cents for every dollar a man earns. So when one career has to bend around a newborn or a cross-country move or a parent who suddenly needs care, the arithmetic almost always elects hers as the one that gives. It feels like a personal choice. It is mostly a structure wearing the mask of a choice. So for 15 years, Kim and Lauren are indistinguishable. Two identical lives running in parallel until the day one of them takes a hit. A divorce, a layoff, a diagnosis, a sudden empty side of the bed. And a hit always comes for somebody eventually. The only thing you don't get to know in advance is the date. When it lands on Lauren, her life doesn't dip. It caves in because there was never a floor of her own underneath it. Only his, and his just left. When the identical hit lands on Kim, it hurts like hell, but it does not take everything, because the floor she stands on has her own name on the deed. Here is what I need you to actually hear, because the world is engineered to make you hear the opposite. The difference between these two women is not intelligence. It is not discipline. And it is absolutely, categorically, not how much either of them loved her husband. It was one decision, made quietly, in years that felt far too ordinary for a decision to matter. Comfort is not control. You can have every comfort a shared household hands you and still personally own almost none of the safety it appears to give you. Let me say the same thing in even plainer words, because it is the spine of everything that follows. A shared lifestyle is not a personal safety net. The life you build with another person and the floor you personally stand on are two completely different objects, and almost every one of us, women most of all, has been quietly trained to mistake one for the other. We are taught that a stable relationship is a financial plan. It is not a plan. A partner can absolutely be your partner. The arithmetic still has to be yours, in your name, where no one can move it without you. And if you've ever felt that low, private hum, I'm comfortable, but I'm not sure I'm actually safe, then hear this clearly. You are not being paranoid, and you are not being ungrateful, and you are certainly not being disloyal. You are being accurate. That hum is your own arithmetic trying to get a word in. The unease you feel about depending on someone is not a flaw in your character to talk yourself out of. It is information. It is the smartest part of you doing math in the background that the rest of your life keeps telling you to ignore. So, here is exactly where we're going. First, I'm going to show you how that 30% gap actually forms. Not as a slogan, but as a mechanism you can watch assemble itself, decision by decision, inside an ordinary marriage where nobody did a single thing wrong. Then I'll show you the numbers nobody quotes on a first date, what the average woman's income actually does the year a marriage ends, and what it does the year a husband dies. And then, this is the part that matters, I'm going to hand you the floor itself. The concrete, unglamorous, nobody-can-take-it structure you can start building under your own 2 feet this week using money you already have. Because the goal was never to get rich, and it was never to leave anyone. The goal is the only thing money is truly for, the power to say no. No to the job that pays well and quietly costs you everything. No to the room you would rather walk out of. No to staying somewhere purely because leaving turned out to be too expensive. Wealth was never the prize. Choice is the prize, and choice has a price, and the price is a floor with your name on it. The system was never built to hand us that floor, so we are going to build it ourselves, and it starts with the one mechanism that decides everything, the one I'm walking you straight into right now. So let's actually watch the gap form, not as a theory, as a sequence of small, reasonable, loving decisions, none of which looks like a mistake on the day it's made. This is the part that matters, because the 30% gap is never one big betrayal. It's 100 sensible Tuesdays in a row. Go back to Lauren, 8 years into the marriage. The first baby arrives. Now there's a daycare bill on the kitchen table, and it is staggering. In 38 states and Washington, D.C., full-time infant care now costs more than in-state public college tuition. So the couple does the math the way almost every couple does it, and the math says something that sounds completely obvious. Lauren's paycheck, after daycare, after the commute, after taxes, barely clears the cost of going to work. His doesn't because he earns more. That 80 cents on the dollar gap we talked about doing its quiet work. So she steps back. Just for a couple of years. Just until the kids are in school. Everyone in the room agrees it's the smart call. And on the narrow math of that 1 year, they're right. Here's what that math leaves out. And it's the most expensive omission of Lauren's life. When you compare her salary to the daycare bill, you are comparing 1 year of her income to 1 year of a cost that ends. But the career doesn't lose 1 year. A dollar she doesn't earn at 30 isn't a missing dollar. It's the missing raise built on that dollar and the raise built on that raise. And the retirement contribution she never made, and the 30 years of growth that contribution never got to do. Money invested early doesn't add, it multiplies. So the dollar she skips at 30 isn't worth $1 at 65, it's worth the $7 or $8 it would have quietly become. Put a real number on it, because the researchers have. Take a woman on a modest salary, not a high earner, just an ordinary paycheck, who steps out for only 5 years in her mid-20s. Across her working life, she loses around $467,000, and only a fraction of that is the wages she skipped. The rest is the wage growth that never compounded and the retirement savings that never got planted. Nearly $500,000 off a modest income for a pause that felt at the time like the responsible thing to do. And the higher the salary, the bigger the hole. That's the floor of the cost, not the ceiling. And it's for childcare alone. And notice the shape of that loss, because it tells you where the real damage hides. Of that near $500,000, only a slice is the salary she skipped. The researchers split it 3 ways. The wages not earned, the raises that never compounded on top of them, and the retirement savings that never got planted at all, and the last 2 dwarf the first. One quiet casualty inside that third bucket, the employer match. Every year Lauren is home, her company's offer to drop free money into a 401k beside her own contribution simply goes uncollected. It isn't money she spent. It's money that was sitting on the table with her name on it, and the table got cleared. Because the second wave comes later, and almost nobody sees it coming. Somewhere in her 50s, Lauren's mother gets sick. Guess who the family turns to? Women are the default caregivers at both ends of life, and stepping out to care for an aging parent costs the average woman somewhere between $295,000 and $325,000 in lost wages, lost Social Security, and lost retirement, a second six-figure hole dug at the exact age she was supposed to be doing her heaviest saving. 2 career interruptions, 20 years apart, both framed as love, both invisible on the day, both permanent. Now layer on the part most people have never heard, because it's where the gap turns from large to structural. Social Security does not average your whole life. It takes your highest 35 years of earnings. And if you don't have 35 years, it doesn't shrug and use what you've got. It fills every missing year with a zero. A literal zero, dropped into the average that decides your check for the rest of your life. So Lauren's years at home don't just cost her the salary she skipped at the time. Decades later, they walk back into the room as zeros in the one formula that's supposed to catch her at the end. The system that's meant to be the floor under everyone has a trap door, and the trap door is shaped exactly like the years a woman spends caring for the people she loves. And here is the cruelest mechanical detail of all. When Lauren tries to go back, and she does try, she doesn't return to where she left. She returns behind. Employers read the gap on the resume as risk. The raise she'd have negotiated never happened, so every future raise is a percentage of a smaller number. She re-enters a few rungs down and climbs the rest of her life trying to catch a version of herself that never stopped walking. That's not her failing to lean in. That's a penalty, applied on the way back through a door she was encouraged to walk out of. Stack it all up, and the 30% retirement gap stops looking like a mystery and starts looking like arithmetic. Lower starting pay, multiplied by years out for kids, multiplied by years out for parents, multiplied by zeros in the Social Security formula, multiplied by a re-entry penalty, multiplied by 30 years of compounding that all of it missed. Nobody embezzled anything. Nobody did a single thing wrong. The household ran beautifully the entire time. And that is precisely why it's so dangerous, because a slow, polite, reasonable process that nobody objects to will hollow out a woman's independence far more completely than any villain ever could. Meanwhile, 3 houses down, Kim made most of the same loving choices. She had the kids. She stepped back too. But she kept a retirement account open in her own name, and kept something flowing into it even during the lean years, even when the amount felt insulting. She kept her own credit alive. She treated her step back as a season, not a surrender, and she made sure the structure with her name on it never went fully dark. Same love, same family, same sacrifices mostly. One quiet difference in where the money was pointed, and that single difference is the entire space between a woman who has options at 60 and a woman who has none. This is the engine. This is how 2 identical lives end up in 2 different centuries of financial reality, without anyone ever making a decision that looked wrong in the moment. And if it were only about retirement, decades away, you might be tempted to file it under later. But the gap doesn't wait politely for old age to matter. It has a way of presenting its bill early and without warning, the day the marriage ends, or the day it ends for the worst possible reason. So, let's talk about what the numbers actually do on that day, because they are far uglier and far closer than the comfortable surface ever lets on. So here is what the numbers actually do on the day the hit lands. I promised you the figures nobody quotes on a first date. Here's the first. Now that you've seen the machinery underneath, it should land harder. When a marriage ends, the average woman's household income falls by 41%, and her ex-husband's falls by roughly half that. Sit with that. The same divorce, the same decree, the same judge, and one person walks out into a 41% smaller life while the other absorbs half the blow. The marriage was shared. The exit is not. And the reason isn't the lawyer or the settlement. It's everything we just watched accumulate. She's the one who stepped back, so she's the one with less of her own to land on. And if you're thinking that's a young divorce problem, that you're past the danger zone, it's the opposite. The fastest growing divorce in America is among people over 50. It's roughly doubled since the 1990s, and today around a third of all divorces happen after 50. That's the worst possible timing because it lands at the exact moment there's the least runway left to rebuild. The data is brutally specific here. After a late life divorce, a woman's standard of living drops about 45%, while a man's drops around 21%. Not because the law favors him, because he kept the earning engine running while hers idled, and at 60 there's no time to restart it. Then there's the version nobody wants to say out loud, because it isn't a choice anyone makes. Women, on average, outlive their husbands. Widowhood isn't an if hiding in your future. For most married women, it's a when. And when it comes, a widow's income falls by about 37%, while a widower's falls by roughly 22%. The same law spouse, a very different size of hole. If every dollar ran through him, his name on the accounts, his login on the portal, his understanding of where it all lived, then losing him doesn't just break your heart. It locks you out of your own life at the precise moment you have the least capacity to pick the lock. Which brings us to the trap almost nobody sees coming, the one that lives in the paperwork. Here's the thing very few people know. A retirement account built during a marriage is often legally half yours in a divorce. But you do not get it automatically. To claim your share of a workplace retirement plan, a court has to issue a specific order, and somebody has to actually file it correctly. Miss that step or never know it exists, and you can be fully entitled to that money on paper and still receive none of it. The law can be entirely on your side, and the dollars still end up entirely on his. Not because you weren't owed them, but because the system assumed you'd know the move, and nobody ever told you the move existed. Rights you can't enforce are not rights. They're decorations. Picture Lauren in that moment, because this is where the abstract turns into a Tuesday afternoon. The marriage is over. Maybe it ended, maybe he did, and she's sitting at the same kitchen table from the beginning of this story, except now there's a lawyer's email open on the laptop asking for a list of accounts. The same kitchen table where the daycare math once seemed so reasonable. And she realizes, with a cold drop in her stomach, that she can't make the list. She doesn't know which bank holds the savings. She doesn't have the login to the brokerage. She isn't sure if there's a pension, or how much, or whose name the car is in. For 30 years, the money was real and it was theirs. But the knowledge of it lived entirely on his side of the table. And now his side of the table is empty or hostile. She isn't fighting for half. She's starting from a blank page, trying to reconstruct her own financial life from memory while the clock and the legal bills run. That is what dependence looks like on the day it finally presents the invoice. Not poverty in a movie. A smart, capable woman who simply was never holding the map. And then there is the floor beneath the floor, the place where dependence stops being a risk and becomes a cage. I'm going to handle this carefully because it's real, and it's more common than the comfortable surface admits. In studies of domestic violence survivors, financial control shows up in almost every single case. The most cited figure is that it appears in 99% of them. It's the quiet engine of the whole thing. Control the money, and you don't need to control anything else, because she can't leave a room she can't afford to walk out of. That's not a fringe statistic. In one survey, 3 out of 4 people who stayed with an abusive partner longer than they wanted to said they stayed for economic reasons. Money was the lock. Not love, not confusion, not weakness, arithmetic. And the cruelest part is how invisible it is from outside. It can look like a nice house and a quiet marriage, right up until someone needs a door and discovers there isn't one. I'm not telling you this to frighten you, and I'm definitely not telling you the man across the table is a threat. Most aren't. I'm telling you because of what it reveals about what money is actually for. A personal financial floor is not a bet against your marriage. It's the thing that keeps your staying a choice instead of a sentence. When you can leave and you don't, that's love. When you can't leave and you don't, that's just a locked door with a wedding photo on it. And you deserve to know which one you're living in, while everything is calm enough to find out. So let me say the quiet part plainly, because this is the reframe the whole video turns on. Wanting your own money, your own account, your own credit, your own understanding of where the assets are, that is not distrust. It is not disloyalty. It is not you planning your exit. It is you making sure that if life ever forces the question, the answer is yours to give and not someone else's to decide for you. The healthiest relationships on earth are the ones where both people could walk and choose every single day to stay. You cannot truly choose to stay somewhere you can't afford to leave. Independence doesn't weaken love. It's the only thing that lets love be freely given. And here's the good news, the part that should let your shoulders drop an inch. Every single trap we just walked through has the same key. The divorce cliff, the widowhood drop, the paperwork you didn't know existed, even the locked door. All of them shrink the moment there is a floor with your name on it, not his goodwill. Not the system's mercy, yours. But before we build that floor, I have to clear away the 3 thoughts that are almost certainly forming in your head right now. The very reasonable-sounding objections that keep smart women from ever starting. The "but my marriage is different," the "but he's the one who's good with money." And the most dangerous one of all, the one that fools the most capable women in the room, "but I earn plenty myself, so none of this applies to me." That last one has a trap door in it too. And it's the one we're walking into next. Because earning the money, it turns out, is not at all the same as being safe with it. So let's clear those 3 objections out of the way, one at a time, because until we do, none of the solutions will stick. You'll nod along and then quietly decide they're for other women. The first one is the softest and the most universal. But my marriage is different. And it might be. It might be extraordinary. But here's the thing about that 41% income drop and that 45% collapse after 50. Those aren't numbers from bad marriages. They're the average of all of them. Every single couple inside those statistics also believed theirs was different, right up until the day it wasn't. Believing your marriage is the exception isn't evidence that it is. It's the exact feeling every person in the data had too. You're allowed to love your marriage completely and still respect a base rate. Wearing a seatbelt was never an accusation against your driving. The second objection sounds more practical. But he's the one who's good with money. Why would I duplicate what he already does well? 2 problems with that, and the first is just structure. Even if he is genuinely brilliant with money, especially if he is, concentrating all the knowledge and all the assets in one person doesn't make the household safer. It makes it fragile. One person who knows where everything is and how all of it works is not a strength. It's a single point of failure, and life specializes in finding single points of failure. Illness finds them. Death finds them. So does a man who one day decides he'd rather not share. Skill doesn't protect you from concentration. It just makes the concentration feel reasonable. And the second problem with "he's better at this" is that it usually isn't even true. This is the part that should make you a little angry. When researchers actually measured it, across more than 5 million accounts, women investors didn't just hold their own. They outperformed men, on average, by about 0.4% a year, mostly by trading less and panicking less. And yet only about a third of women say they feel confident making investment decisions. Look hard at that gap. The competence was already there. The confidence was the only thing missing. And confidence is not a skill, it's a permission slip you were taught not to sign. "He's just better at this" is, most of the time, a story 2 people agreed to tell, not a fact either of them ever checked. Which brings us to the third objection, and this is the one I most need the high earners in the room to hear. "None of this applies to me. I make good money myself." I'm sorry, but that's the trapdoor with the nicest carpet over it. Because income is a flow, and security is a stock, and they are not the same thing. A big paycheck that lands in accounts you don't control, feeding a retirement you don't manage, while your own credit file stays thin and you couldn't name where half the assets live. That is a high-earning woman who is still completely exposed. And we know it happens at the top, not just the middle, because when researchers studied wealthy women with hundreds of thousands, even millions in investable assets, they found that about half of them still hand the long-term financial decisions to their husbands. Earning the money, it turns out, is not remotely the same as being safe with it. Comfort is not control. A 7-figure household can have a wife with no floor of her own, and she will not find out until the floor is the only thing she needs. Make it concrete for a second. Imagine a woman pulling in $200,000 a year, successful by any measure, the envy of her old college roommates. But the house is titled in his name, the brokerage account is his login, the business equity is structured around him, and because everything was always ours, she never built a credit file or an account that was only hers. On paper, she's wealthy. In a crisis, she's a guest in her own financial life, holding a big income and no leverage. That's the difference between flow and stock in one image. The flow looks like power right up until the flow stops, and then only the stock you actually own in your own name is still standing. This, by the way, is the one thing Kim understood that Lauren didn't. Kim never doubted her husband for a second. She built her own floor anyway. Not instead of trusting him, but so that her trust could stay a gift instead of becoming a dependency. So, if all three of those objections are that flimsy, why do so many smart, capable women defer anyway? And they do. Here's the part that should stop you cold. The most thorough research we have on this question went looking among affluent women, the ones with the most means to stand on their own, and still found about half of them handing the long-term money decisions to their husbands. Notice what that implies. If deferral is that common precisely where the resources are greatest, then it is not a habit you can out-earn. The reasons, when women are asked directly, are heartbreakingly gentle. He seems to know more. I wouldn't know where to begin. I don't want to start a fight over something that's working. And, said out loud by well over half of younger married women, I just want to be taken care of. None of that is stupidity. It's the opposite. It's love and trust and a desire for peace, all pointed in a direction that quietly costs the person aiming them. But here's where the gentle story turns, and you need to see the turn. When those same researchers followed women through the moments the deferral was supposed to be safe for, the divorces, the deaths, about 3 in 4 discovered financial surprises they never saw coming, and an equal share of widows and divorcees said the same thing in hindsight. I wish I had been involved while I still had the chance. Not I wish I'd trusted him less, just involved. Deferral feels like intimacy in the calm years and reveals itself as exposure in the hard ones. It dresses up as the most loving thing you can do, and it hands you the bill at the worst possible moment, when you are grieving or fighting and least able to pay it. So let me collapse all 3 objections into the single truth underneath them, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Involvement is not distrust. Knowing where your money lives is not the first step toward leaving. It is maintenance. Ordinary, unglamorous, grown-up maintenance. You don't install a smoke detector in a house because you expect it to burn down. You install it because the cost of being wrong is everything you love, and the cost of being safe is one afternoon and a little discomfort. Knowing where your own money lives is the exact same move. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. Not in theory, not someday, but this week, with money and accounts you already have. I'm going to give you the floor itself. The specific, concrete, do-it-in-an-afternoon structure that takes every frightening number in this video and shrinks it down to something survivable. No jargon, no lectures, just the moves nobody ever taught you, in the order that actually matters. Let's build it. So here's the floor. 5 moves in the order that actually matters, every one of them doable with money and accounts you already have. None of this requires leaving anyone, hiding anything, or being rich. It just requires that some part of your financial life have only your name on it. Move 1, open one account that is yours alone, not instead of the joint account alongside it. Your own checking or savings in your name only, and start feeding it whatever you can, even $10 a week. This is the account that turns I can't afford to leave into I have options, and it does it quietly, automatically, in the background of a perfectly happy marriage. Money in your own name is the difference between a door and a wall. Build the door while the house is calm. Aim, over time, for a few months of your own expenses. Think of it as your freedom fund. But the size matters far less than the habit. Automate it. A small transfer the day after payday, so it happens on its own, without a decision and without a conversation you have to brace for. Move 2, build credit in your own name. If everything is under his social security number, the cards, the loans, the history, then your credit file is thin or empty, and the day you need to rent, insure, or borrow on your own, the system treats you like you don't exist. So get one credit card in your name, use it for something small every month, pay it off, and let it quietly build a financial identity that belongs to you. Pull your credit report this week. It's free, you're entitled to it, and you cannot fix what you've never looked at. A woman with no credit history of her own can be denied an apartment she can easily afford, simply because on paper she has no track record. That's the wall this move quietly tears down before you ever hit it. Move 3, put retirement in your own name. And this is the one that closes the 30% gap, so don't skip it. Here's what almost no one tells stay-at-home or lower-earning wives. Even in a year you earn nothing, if your spouse works and you file jointly, you can fund a retirement account in your own name. It's called a spousal IRA, and in 2026, you can put in up to about $7,500 a year into an account that is legally entirely yours. Run the math on that because it's staggering. A woman who funds it through just 5 years of a career break can retire with over $300,000 more than the woman who left those same 5 years empty because each of those early contributions has 30 years to compound. That's the entire 30% gap, reversed by 5 years of one simple form. And if you go back to work, grab every dollar of the employer match the day you're eligible. It's the free money we watched Lauren leave on the table. And it's the highest return decision you will ever make. Move 4, draw the map. Sit down and write the one document that the woman at the lawyer's table would have given anything to have. Every account, every institution, every login location, every insurance policy, every debt, and where every asset actually lives. Then put one date on the calendar a year, a money meeting, where you both walk through all of it together. This isn't surveillance, and it isn't suspicion. It's the difference between losing him and also losing the map. You are allowed to love someone completely and still refuse to be a stranger to your own life. Move 5. Handle the paper that outlives you. Make sure you have a will, and, this is the one people miss, check the beneficiary on every retirement account and insurance policy because that little form overrides your will entirely. Learn that the order to split a workplace retirement plan in a divorce has a name, so it never slips past you. And know that for some couples, a postnuptial agreement is a legitimate tool, not a betrayal. I'm not your attorney or your advisor, and this isn't personalized advice, so take these to a fee-only fiduciary or a family law attorney who answers to you and no one else. But walk in knowing the moves exist. The women who get blindsided are almost always the ones who never knew there was something to ask for. Now, 2 of you are already arguing with me. One is thinking, I'm 55. Isn't it too late? It is not. The worst day to start was 20 years ago. The second worst day is the day you decide it's too late and stop. A woman who begins building her own floor at 55 still meets her 70s on her own 2 feet instead of on someone else's mercy. And move 4, the map, costs nothing and protects you tonight. The other is thinking, there's no spare money here to move. Then start with the free moves. Pull the credit report, draw the map, learn where the assets live. Not one of those costs $1, and together they are most of the protection. The floor is built in the order of what you can do today, not what you wish you could do. That's the floor. One account, one credit file, one retirement account, one map, one set of documents, and not one of them requires a single ounce of distrust, because that was the whole point, all along. Remember Kim and Lauren, same love, same family, same comfortable life. The only thing that separated them at the end was whether anything had Kim's name on it. Comfort is not control, but control is buildable this week in an afternoon by you. So let me leave you with the reframe that started all of this. A personal floor was never a bet against your marriage. It's the thing that lets you wake up every morning and choose it freely, because you're staying because you want to, not because the math won't let you leave. That is what real security feels like. Not a man, not a paycheck, but the quiet, unshakable knowledge that whatever comes, you will be standing on something that is yours. The system was never built to hand us that floor. The pay was lower, the gaps were punished, the paperwork was hidden, and nobody drew us the map. So we stopped waiting for it to be handed over, and we built it ourselves. One account, one decision, one afternoon at a time. Start with move 1 today, not Monday, today. If this gave you language for something you felt for years, subscribe and stay with me. Because the next thing they never taught us is exactly what we're building here, together. The power to say no is the only wealth that was ever really the point. Go own it.